Don't jog down Bryer Road. I was new to the area, and I was using Meetup to see where the local joggers liked to jog. The whole area is very hilly, and while that's a good workout, it is also dangerous as cars come up over the crest and just barely see you. I've had this happen to me too many times to be willing to try it again. I needed something flatter and without as many turns and twists. I was also checking out Google Maps and found a relatively straight and level road not too far from my new home. It had the benefit of being relatively untraveled and with houses far from the road. As a woman, I generally prefer roads like this since I'm unlikely to be harassed by motorists or catcalled by leering eyes lining the road. I've had to use pepper spray once on a guy who followed me for a half mile and wouldn't take a hint that I didn't want to see whatever it is he wanted to show me. Because of my new commute, I'd likely be jogging around dawn or dusk, so the relative seclusion and absence of others is even more important. The road that looked promising was called Bryer Road, and it was more or less wound through a forested area. Much to my surprise, as I scanned Meetup, I could see the road itself was quite infamous. While most of the reviews of Bryer Road jogging were not specific and merely said that they would avoid it, a few wrote some pretty fantastic stuff. One of the items that stuck in my head included a report of one jogger hearing loud tribal drums pounding away from somewhere deep in the woods. Another person reported seeing a deer that they said had 3 brilliant yellow eyes, which would watch them pass from some tall weeds. The one that really drew my skepticism and incredulity and finally dismissal of all of these concerns was one person describing the experience of jogging through the Bermuda Triangle. I had just gotten a job working supervising a research and development team for a lens manufacturing company. I have 2 master's degrees, and I know that the Bermuda Triangle, ghosts, monsters, UFOs were just all things boring, uneducated people in rural areas made up. So, one Friday morning, I set out to jog Bryer Road and, well, discover if anything was there at all. There was a little historical roadside marker where I parked my car near the junction point at the start of Bryer Road. It was a chilly fall morning, and there was a thin layer of hazy fog with some low-thin clouds that kept the sunlight at bay. It rained last night, so the road was still a bit wet. I wore my blaze yellow running jacket, my navy blue jogging pants, and an orange-colored sweatband. I forgot to charge my wireless earbuds, so I was stuck with the looping kind, and I had to awkwardly loop them around my sweatband and into my ears. I stretched and then started to warm up, walk down to where the road started, and then I took off, headed against traffic like you're supposed to. The road wasn't particularly well maintained. The shoulders were chipping away and weeds popped up in the cracks. The trees were overgrown close to the road, and poison ivy vines crept down from them, perilously close to where I was running, so I had to keep about 2/3 of the way into the lane. I couldn't make out much past the fog. It just looked like a lot of overgrown trees and overgrown hills arrayed on a slight decline around an easy left bend in the road. I could occasionally hear a loud bird call. There were 2 houses at the mouth of the road that I could actually see from the road, and both looked abandoned and dilapidated. As I got up to speed, I started getting caught up thinking about starting my job next week, and as my mind wandered from topic to topic, and I then started to think about the plans I made with my new coworkers for tomorrow. One of them, Alicia, was a real spark, a real social butterfly, and she invited me to join the rest of the lab for a swim in her pool and drinks in her backyard. I was really looking forward to it. I got lost in thought for about a mile into my jog. I was feeling good, alert, my heart rate elevated and steady. Maybe a bit of ankle pain because I was a little rusty. I haven't had a chance to jog in almost a week and a half because of the move and just general craziness. As I made it along the long bend, the fog suddenly thickened, and I decided to slow down and jog closer to the shoulder in case the driver wasn't paying attention. As I emerged from the thickest part of it, I was startled to see another jogger racing past me. At first, I felt really, really heartened and validated in my choice. Of course, there was no such thing as a haunted road, and of course this was a popular jogging spot. See? Another jogger right there, I told myself. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, was caked in mud and had a bloody scratch on their cheek. They seemed at first to be waving their hands towards me vigorously, though their face was mostly obscured by a muddy hood. From far away I could see their mouth move, and as we crossed paths at the closest point, I pulled the earbud out of my ear, and because I saw their mouth move, I was greeted with a shocking sound. The person's voice was screeching and high-pitched. It sounded like Alvin and the Chipmunks played fast on an old, sped-up, squealing cassette tape player. I couldn't make out what they actually said to me, though, and they quickly faded away, jogging fast into the thickest part of the fog behind me. The disheveled appearance and rapid disappearance of the other jogger, especially that voice, if I can even call it a voice, made me break my stride. I felt my heart rate leap up as frogs leapt in my throat. I paused and put my arms at my side defensively. What did I just see? What did I just hear? My mind went from releasing all kinds of dopamine, rewarding me for ignoring pseudoscience BS, to dumping adrenaline in an amount close to that time I pepper sprayed that creeper dude. I definitely was shaken up, but as I spun around, dancing in a moment of indecision of whether or not to continue, I decided to press on with my jogging. The fog started to clear as I cleared another mile, but then I noticed something impossible. The sun, which had hung just off to my left, cresting the tree line, was starting to dim, and now appeared lower behind the trees, casting long shadows on the road. I kept running. I kept trying to shake off the creeping sense of something being very, very wrong, as I panted to myself that I must have just forgotten where the sun was where I started. I kept running, and then my music went dead. I was in the middle of some old-school Lady Gaga when it went dead. I checked my phone strapped to my shoulder in its holder, and as I tried to turn on the screen, I realized that not only did my music stop, I couldn't even hear my footsteps beating the pavement. I pulled the earbuds out, and I strained to hear myself as I checked to see if my feet were really connecting with the ground. I couldn't hear myself breathing, and as I tried to hear my running shoes contact the cracked pavement, I started to hear faint music in my footsteps. I could actually hear Lady Gaga's voice instead of the rhythm of my footfalls. I put one earbud back into my left ear, and I could hear the clip-clop of my feet and the rush of the air in and out of my mouth through the earbud. I stopped altogether, and I watched it as all the world shimmer and sparkle for a second, and then I could hear my music in my earbuds again, and the sound of my breath in the open ear. I whipped my head around in all directions as the aerial glitter started to lift. I was truly panicked at that point, and I decided that I must have had some sort of stroke or something, so I ripped my phone from the shoulder carrier and proceeded to call an ambulance for myself. To my dismay, the phone screen was black and dead, yet it continued to play music. Looking at the dark screen made me realize just how dark out it had become. I looked on my left and saw the last strange of orange and gold strain through the trees. If not for the fact that I knew my car was about 3 miles parked back at the historical marker, just up that mild incline in that little bend in the road, I would have been at a complete loss. Stroke or morning sunset, I just needed to get back to my car and figure out things from there. So I turned around and started at a full sprint, not my usual 80% jogging. I was going all out. First, I noticed the road ahead had a different shape to it than I remembered just jogging down. I knew that I was jogging in the fog most of the time, but this road was hillier. The trees were taller and denser. The road was missing passing stripes, and I don't recall seeing any guardrails before. Just as I started to seriously question my sanity, the weirdness took a backseat to the impossible once again, as I saw the sun, now nearly gone, move from my right side, drift across the road, and come to rest on my left side, where it was before I turned around. I felt nauseous, like when I spun around in circles with my eyes closed as a kid. I didn't know which way to go. I felt like somehow the entire world spun around me to keep me going in the direction I was already going. So I was wondering if I had to turn around again to get back to my car. After a few minutes, I turned around again, and I was fairly certain I was going the correct way this time. I took a few more long steps as I tried to get myself back into a rhythm, but I heard a very loud noise come from behind me. As I turned to see in the dying light, the steel guardrails pop free of their wooden posts and fall into the dirt. The slight curved steel rail started to roll, bending and twisting like snakes or worms in the dirt before they curled up and arched up, towering about 15 or 20 feet into the air. Both pretzeled and looped themselves into giant walking metal ribbons, with either end of the rail contacting the group like a stick figure feet with a loop for a head. While they made the most monstrous noise of grinding metal as they warped and wrapped themselves into a bipedal form, the rail's yellow reflector discs turned into amber eyes in the drops of sunlight. Their discs turned and twisted at the peak of their loop heads and focused on me, lowering slightly on their mounts as if they were displeased with my presence. I turned and I started to run. I ran the fastest I've ever run in my entire life. I heard metal scrape and bash the road as the two towering guardrail figures stormed after me as fast as they could bend their steel and grip the failing asphalt. In my mind, I wondered what they might do to me if they caught up to me. Maybe they would bend over and lasso me in the loop and then, well, close the loop around my neck, or my head, or my midsection. Maybe that's how they ate. I started to think about leaving the road and ducking into the woods. Poison ivy, three-eyed deer, and phantom drovers be damned. They all seemed more appealing than being boa constricted to death by a giant twist tie. Then again, my mind raced, and I thought maybe these things wanted me to leave the road behind and into the waiting clutches of whatever was else out there. The fog was thickening again, and I felt like I was heading the right way, and I might be able to stay on the road and lose these things in the fog. Then two fast, bright headlights blinded me, and I jumped out of the way onto the muddy shoulder. I slipped and fell flat with my face banging against a piece of the broken road. I clutched my cheek as I felt the sting of a cut and the warm trickle of blood stream down my cheek and chin. I turned to see a dark object, like a cube with two brilliant lights, swim through the fog and bowl into the guardrail monsters. The guardrails then unribboned themselves and rolled back to their posts along the side of the road as the two cubes with lights drifted off of the road, passing as if ghosts through trees and forest before disappearing from sight. I was covered in mud, and in addition to the cut on my face, I definitely banged up my knee as it burned each time it contacted my muddy pants. It was almost completely dark, and it was getting very cold. I put my hood up with my muddy hands and decided just to keep going. I checked my phone again for good measure. Instead of a blank screen, however, I saw a photo or reflection of myself. The image traced around my face until blood started to gush out of my cheek wound, and then, as if dragging my skull with a torrent of red, the rest of my face, my skin, my ears, and even my lips were ripped off, leaving grayish-reddish muscle tissue and bulging eyes. I audibly screamed to nothing and no one as I contemplated ripping the phone out of its carrier and just throwing it away. However, I got a grip on my absolute terror and just left it where it was. I kept running, and as I started to hit dense fog again that was thick enough to obscure the road, I felt the pain starting to catch up with me. I tried to power through by moving even faster. Then, emerging through the fog, I saw a normal-looking figure, a woman. Tears and even sweat soaking through my wetband in my eyes obscured my vision. She looked normal enough to me, so I started to try to flag her down as I tried to run even faster. As we crossed at our closest point, I yelled to her to turn back now, to turn back and help me. She passed me, and I passed her, and she seemed to disappear outside of the fog as I went headlong into it. I felt more frogs leap about my throat as a cold sweat sprang over me. That was me. I talked to myself. That was me going in. I thought about turning around to warn her, to warn myself, but then another anomaly took place. I witnessed a sudden lifting of the fog, but also the beating up of the water on the pavement, like the pavement was suddenly oil repelling the water. Then the beads were hoisted into the air like someone attached a fishing hook to the trailing center of a teardrop and yanked them back up to the sky. As the mist from the reverse rain cleared, I found myself less than 500 feet away from the cross street where my car was parked. The sun was up, nearly cresting the trees like when I started to run. I was still hurt, bruised, cut, scraped, muddy, and bloody, so I defiantly ran the rest of the way to my car and started for home. The short drive home seemed like a blur. I honestly don't remember even getting into my car now that I'm thinking about it, starting it or starting to drive. Before too long, I decided I just needed to desperately be in a public place, so I grabbed the clean jacket I had in the back and my laptop and drove to the only place I felt safe, Starbucks in Little Fort. And when I got there, I opened my laptop and logged on to this meetup and started to type this out. I must have looked like a bat out of hell to the baristas. Every now and then I see them peer over the counter to my little window table, probably wondering if I was on meth or something, as I found myself tapping my foot against the table stand as my fear lingered. As the caffeine started to fortify me and the quiet corporate familiarity started to calm me down a little, I had another heart-pounding discovery. The laptop calendar said it was Sunday at 9 a.m. I went for my run around 7 a.m. on Friday. I realized I'd not checked my phone since seeing my own skin-alive face in it. It was then still strapped to my shoulder under the new cleaner jacket. I was about to jump up and ask the baristas what day it was, but then I realized it would only confirm what they were already suspecting, that I was crazy or high, that they might make me leave. So instead, I braved my phone. I took it out of its carrier, and although the screen was still black this time, when I hit the power button, it turned on like normal. I was awestruck at the home screen confirmed with my laptop, and Google was telling me it was in fact Sunday. I was out jogging on that horrifying road for 2 days somehow. As my phone finished reconnecting with the network and catching up, it showed me I had 5 voicemails. 4 of them were from Alicia, asking me where I was, if I was still going to make it to the lab welcoming party. Her last voicemail was from sometime around 1 a.m. on Sunday and sounded somber and disappointed that I had not shown up. The 5th and final voicemail was from an unknown caller, and instead of a voice, all I could hear was loud drumming, getting louder. I really didn't know who to talk to or who to tell, but I decided to call Alicia to apologize for missing her party. I didn't know what to tell her either. When she picked up, I stammered a bit before launching into an animated and rambling apology. I started to explain that I went for a jog, and that's when she interrupted me and asked me where I went jogging. I told her I was jogging on Bryer Road. She told me what Meetup told me before and what I'm telling you now. Something beyond this world controls Bryer Road, and it does not like trespassers. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in ghosts, monsters, or the Bermuda Triangle-like stuff. It doesn't matter if you don't believe me. Make up any other justification you like for yourself and just take my advice. Don't jog on Bryer Road.